Hey people, John here from Fast Films, and today we're going to go through a 2019 crime thriller movie called The Golden Glove. In the first scene of the movie, Fritz Hanke, the protagonist and a serial terminator, attacks a lady on her bed and suffocates her to death. Afterward, he drags her body downstairs and unclothes it. After unclothing her, he picks up a handsaw and saws the woman's body parts over some music playing in a record player. After cutting the parts into sizable chunks, he arranges them in a briefcase and rushes outside in the dead of the night to dispose of them. Then he gets back home and takes a drink. Just then, some information reveals that the entire incident happened in Hamburg in the year of 1970. After the movie credits, there's a time jump to 1974, and a young girl named Petra is seen receiving a warning from her teacher for failing school too much. Petra is unfazed, walks out and meets Willie using her bicycle pump to get air in his tire. Petra gets her bike and walks away. Willie follows her and gets her a drink on the way home, leaving Petra outside. When he comes with her drink, Willie engages her in conversation and asks her out. Petra gives no definite answer as she leaves Willie. As she leaves, Fritz, who is near them, stares at her with a menacing look. By nightfall, Fritz visits a bar and watches people insult a dejected woman. Then he discusses his meeting with Petra earlier that day with the bartender. Just then, he offers to get a couple of drinks. However, they all rejected him because he was too ugly. Fritz then offers to give the dejected a drink. Later on, Gerda, the dejected woman from earlier, thanks Fritz for the drink and continues her day. Fritz just sits at the bartender's table and keeps enjoying his smoke. He spots Gerda and a woman crying, asks why, and she says the song playing was just too emotional for them. Eventually, he brings Gerda home and sits her down. Gerda notices the rotten smell from his house and asks about it. However, Fritz lies about his Greek neighbors being stinky. He then gets to his kitchen, pours both of them a drink, and puts on some music. Then he gets down to violating Gerda while she's asleep. The next morning, he urges her to be out of his house by the time he's back. Gerda quickly gets up and searches his house for any booze. She doesn't find any, so she puts on some clothes and cleans up his apartment. She finds out his toilet was almost non-existent and restricts herself to vacuuming the living room. While doing so, she smells something terrible and traces it to a part of the wall. At that moment, Fritz walks into his apartment to find Gerda waiting patiently for him. He gets annoyed and throws her out of his house. Gerda knocks on his door and asks for her teeth. Fritz allows her back in and notices that she cleaned up everywhere. He sits her down and finds out about her daughter, Rosie. Gerda says her daughter is a butcher and is unmarried. Hearing this, Fritz urges Gerda to bring Rosie to his house that Sunday for a coffee date. Gerda reluctantly agrees and gets down to pleasing Fritz. Midway during the act, Fritz gets annoyed and rushes to the kitchen to get a sausage. Getting back, he takes a bite out of the sausage and goes to sleep. The next day, Fritz makes Gerda sign an agreement to release her daughter to him. She does so and gets to make breakfast for the both of them. Amidst cooking, she puts on a dress Fritz chose for her and has a drink with him. Fritz throws some alcohol into the pot. Just then, there's a knock on the door, and Fritz finds out his friend, Siggy, was behind the door. The duo exchange pleasantries and have lunch served by Gerda. The trio settle down to eat, drink, and smoke all day long as they hear Siggy whining about his wife leaving him. That night, Siggy leaves Fritz's home drunk and wasted. In the next scene, a young lady arrives at Hanshua Bar late at night and has a seat with the old ladies there. She minds her own business until one of the ladies at the table starts being sassy. The lady keeps her cool and continues sipping her drink. Meanwhile, Fritz gets annoyed over Gerda's daughter not showing up and breaks a glass with his own hands. He walks to the bathroom to wash off afterward. The lady notices this and walks over to Gerda to encourage her. Then she invites Gerda to her place and leaves the bar before Fritz comes out. When Fritz eventually comes out of the bathroom, he finds Gerda gone. Annoyed, Fritz puts on his coat, gets a whole bottle of drink, and proceeds to talk with some old ladies by their table. Moments later, he's seen talking to them about how good he was at doing the bed thingy. Just then, a fight starts in the bar and Fritz invites the three women, Anna, Herda, and Inga, to his home. On the way, Herda faints and is left behind. Upon getting to his place, Inga and Anna both complained about the stinky smell coming from his place. Fritz again lies about the neighbors cooking some stinky food and orders the ladies to please themselves. Anna says no and receives a beating from Fritz till she succumbs. Fritz then tells her to pee in his toilet so she could get ready. Upon finding out she escaped his grasp, Fritz gets annoyed and terminates Inga. Then he opens the hole in his wall and stuffs it with Inga's body parts. The next day, Fritz gets hit by a car and is rushed to the hospital. Later on, Willie's seen in the neighborhood taking a stroll with his bike. He reaches the Hanshua bar and walks inside it. He sits at the corner and watches life go on inside the bar. Then a huge man comes to his table and freaks him out over talks of death and whatnot. Willie slowly walks to the counter and gets a drink. Fritz is then seen at the bar with a cast on his neck as he talks about his experience with the ladies. He further promises his uninterested conversation partner that he was going to quit drinking. Then they toast to a new beginning. Meanwhile, Willie asks the bartender why the curtains were closed. The bartender tells him it's so that people don't see the sun when they drink. Willie then walks out of the bar afterwards. In the next scene, Fritz seen at home writhing in pain on his bed. After some time, he dresses up and walks further into the city in search of Mr. Walter. He asks a passerby who directs him downstairs. Luckily for Fritz, he gets to meet Walter, who accompanies him to find something new for him to wear. After giving him what to wear, Walter shows Fritz his new office. Apparently, Fritz had got a job as a security guard. After settling in, Fritz walks to the bathroom, pointing his gun throughout the time. On the way, he comes across the cleaner, Miss Denningson, who's startled. After apologizing for his behavior, he walks back to his office. When the cleaner's shift is over, he greets her goodbye and continues his patrol. After a couple of times, Fritz gets used to his new job. One night, he meets Miss Denningson's husband, Eric, at his workplace. He's invited to the party with them and reluctantly agrees. Further into the night, a drunk Mr. and Mrs. Denningson dance like lunatics all over the small crib. Thankfully, Fritz is sober, but is forced to watch the two drunkards party irrationally. He leaves them a little while later after saying goodbye. The next morning, Fritz has breakfast like a normal person. By nightfall, Miss Denningson comes to his office with a drink in her hand. Fritz allows her in and urges to take a sip of her drink if she wants to. He pulls up a chair from another room and has a conversation with Miss Denningson. She tells him about their late mortgage payments and bursts into tears. He tries to comfort her, but she just offers him a drink instead. Fritz stares at her for like 5 seconds and relapses. On the next shift, Fritz is seen drinking with the Henningsons. Eric says he notices something off about Fritz and walks out. Now, alone in the room with Miss Denningson, Fritz confesses his love for her and proceeds to violate her. Thankfully, she forces herself out of his hands and rushes out of the little crib. He continues drinking and sleeps it off. He's woken up by an angry man. Fritz just sits there on the floor and walks to the bar to continue his old life. He's given a warm welcome by the usuals in the bar and given a seat. He informs the bartender that he has a new girlfriend named Helga Denningson. Everyone there congratulates him and he offers them a round on him. They all cheer and Fritz gives the lady at the end of the bar a drink as well. She takes the drink and thanks him later on. Then she tells him her life history of how she was forced to be an escort and follows him to his place to have fun for the night. After having fun with Fritz, a blood-ridden lady walks to Fritz's dining table in the middle of the night to have a drink. To pay Fritz back for what he did to her, the lady puts some hot sauce on her hands and rubs them on Fritz's balls. Fritz immediately wakes up in pain. The lady then knocks him out and continues plundering all the drinks in his house. Fritz then rushes to the kitchen to wash the hot sauce off his balls. Once done, he strangles the lady till she stops breathing. Then, he chops her into chunks and hides her in his wall. Later during that night, Fritz meets another woman in the street. He invites her to his home and forces himself on her even after she disapproves of him touching her. Fritz gets violent and walks to get a pair of scissors to cut her tongue out. In the next scene, Fritz's neighbors invite people over to celebrate some event with him. As they dine, one of the ladies there notices maggots dropping into her food from the ceiling. She screams out loud as everyone rushes to find where the maggots were coming from. In the next scene, Willie and Petra park their bicycles in front of the Hanshua bar. They get in to enjoy their night. Unfortunately for Petra, Fritz spots her and becomes fixated on her beautiful face. Willie takes a bathroom break, leaving Petra in a bar filled with hungry men. In the bathroom, the giant from earlier, who turns out to be a veteran, pees on Willie and walks out. Willie waits for him to be done and proceeds to wash himself. Meanwhile, Petra gets subtly teased by a man in the bar and walks out. Noticing Petra was about to be alone, Fritz follows her downstairs to the bathroom. There, she tries to get Willie, but is told to go home, which she does. She doesn't notice Fritz outside, as she rushes to get her bicycle. She notices her pump's missing, but leaves the place anyway. Fritz follows her through the streets till they get to his house. Fritz notices his apartment was on fire, but he urged to stay back till they put it out. After putting out the fire, Fritz tries to run away, but he's stopped by the officers, who asks if he lived in the attic. Fritz says yes, and he's immediately arrested. That's how poor Petra was saved from imminent death. The movie ends as Petra strolls with her bicycle back to her home. Thanks for watching, guys.